Thinking over the last week or two, I'm sure you are too, about the phenomenon of statues in our country being torn down. And I began to think that we should have certain guidelines as to what should remain and what shouldn't remain, and how do we judge this. I thought about St. Peter. St. Peter did some things that, were not good. Number one, St. Peter tried to get in the way of Christ and his mission as Messiah. Surely you will not be crucified. Jesus called him Satan. Get out of my way, you Satan. And then, as we come to the Passion of the Lord, what does Peter do? He denies he even knows Jesus. I don't even know that man. And then we read in the epistles that Peter and Paul had a major falling out, big argument. Why? Because Peter wanted to subject the Gentiles to the Jewish fast laws and the law regarding circumcision. Now, of course, the rest of the story is that Peter realized that God's love was greater than any sin he could commit. He repented and he becomes the first pope. I was wondering if all we knew was the first part of the story. Could we ever build a statue to St. Peter? Would we take his name off of St. Peter's Basilica? Because some things he did, well, they just weren't right. It might seem silly, but over this past week, even a statue of St. Junipero Serra was torn down in San Francisco. What was his sin? He went through the vetting process of becoming a saint. He built 9 missions in California, which served the native peoples of California. And some say, well, the missions were oppressive. It stripped the native peoples of their culture. So, a group of people say Junipero Serra has to come down. The Archbishop of San Francisco, Archbishop Corleone, yesterday had a prayer service and a rite of exorcism near the site where the statue was desecrated. In the life of every human being, there is good and bad. Every human being. And when we look at human beings, sometimes there are good people who do bad things. And sometimes even bad people do good things. Maybe not for the purest of motives, but it does happen. Now, how do we evaluate someone, a life? Maybe it's important that we even evaluate our own lives regarding what I just said to you. How do we evaluate ourselves? Of course, only God can judge, but we can get a pretty good idea of our behavior, what is consistent, what is inconsistent with who we say we are as Christians. A lot of us can say the right thing, we don't always do the right thing. And I will admit to you, you can put me in that basket of deplorables. I can tell you the right thing, I know what the right thing is, but sometimes I just don't do it. And having a little bit of background in the law, maybe sometimes there are mitigating circumstances. How do you like that one for being lawyerly? Okay. First of all, when we evaluate people of the past, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. Why? Because we're looking back in time. It's called anachronism. Anachronistically, looking back in time. And it's very difficult to judge people back in time from our standards of today. And so a lot of the statuary that's being torn down, they are being judged by the standards that we have today. That's not saying that some of the statues should not be torn down. Some of them should. They don't speak to who we are as Americans today. Some statues may indeed be very offensive to certain people as to what they stand for, as to what they portray, or the wrong message that they send out. But you cannot leave this to a mob, vigilantes, to decide who stays and who comes down. We have a system of government, the rule of law, and the rule of law must be obeyed to have a civil society and to avoid chaos in society and to prevent a mob from taking over a country. This is what happened during the French Revolution. A mob took over the country. There is legal recourse. That's the recourse that we should encourage and the recourse that every American should take. To judge anachronistically, it's a very dangerous thing to do. And then to judge persons without taking into context their social situation, the economic situation, and most importantly, what is doable at a certain time in history. What is doable at a certain time in history. Okay. There are two statues which I must speak to you very clearly about as to why they must stay, why they must remain. The first one is George Washington. George Washington is the father of our country. He won the Revolutionary War for us. He also presided over the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. And he was the first president of the United States. He set the tone for all 45 presidents that succeeded him. Without Washington, no country. Washington stepped down from the presidency voluntarily. He could have been the king. But he stepped down voluntarily after 2 terms. The 2-term presidency lasted until President Roosevelt, and then, because of fear of, once again, somebody becoming entrenched in the office, we had an amendment added to the Constitution back in 1952, I think, that said only 2 terms for a president. Was Washington perfect? No. But he is a secular saint. He's a secular saint. What are the complaints against George Washington? He owned slaves. And his wife, Martha, owned slaves. Washington knew slavery was wrong. He knew it. But he's tied in with what? His wife's estate. He's tied in with the culture of the planters in Virginia. And he also knew that in order for us to have a United States of America, that he had to deal with the Southern planters who believed that slavery was a right of the states and that slavery was important for their economic success. And so, Washington, knowing it was wrong, did the best he could under the circumstances in which he found himself. At the end of his life, in his will, he freed his slaves. Not bad, because Martha had slaves of her own. The second one is this: Thomas Jefferson. An extraordinary man, Thomas Jefferson. Without Jefferson, there would be no Declaration of Independence. Without the Declaration of Independence, there would have been no Constitution. And there would be no Abraham Lincoln to free slaves. What did Jefferson do? Jefferson wrote the preamble, beautiful preamble. All men are created equal, endowed with inalienable rights by the Creator. Before the Constitution, he wrote the Virginia Statute on religious liberty. Thomas Jefferson gave us the Louisiana Purchase. Maybe 1/3 of the country would not be American if it were not for Thomas Jefferson. Did he have slaves? Yes, he did. Why? He deplored slavery. He knew it was wrong. That's why he wrote that preamble. But economics of the day, and also trying to negotiate with the other planters of the southern states in order for us to have the United States of America that we have today. And so sometimes, as with Washington, as with Jefferson, you have to compromise in order for a good to happen. And the perfect sometimes is the enemy of the good, because the perfect was not attainable at the time. And with the Constitution, we had the 2/3 compromise, where a slave would be considered only 2/3 of a person in order that the southern states would have representation in Congress. I suppose he did the best he could. He was a conflicted man in many ways. Jefferson gave us that Declaration of Independence. And the reason why we have a Constitution is because the Constitution is supposed to be based on what the Declaration said. All men are created equal. He in Washington did not personally like slavery. But they had to wait. Sometimes you have to wait until the time is right. And the time was right when Abraham Lincoln became President of the United States. I visited Springfield, Illinois, where Lincoln is buried. And in the State House, there are 2 cameos, one to Washington and one to Lincoln. One says the founder, the other one says the Savior. Every American should know their history. Many people do not know their history. Every American should visit Mount Vernon. I prayed at the tomb of Washington. I went to Monticello and prayed at the grave of Thomas Jefferson. And I went to Springfield and venerated the Lincoln Monument there, his burial place. It took time, but Lincoln got it right. But he had to evolve himself. His choice was to save the Union. And he did find slavery abhorrent. And then a war ensued in order to make America a place where everyone would have the dignity accorded to them by their humanity. And Lincoln was able to free the slaves. This coming week, we are going to be celebrating the 4th of July. Never in our country has the lesson that I have given you been more important, because many people will not hear it, many people don't want to hear it. Without Washington, without Jefferson, no country. Are we perfect after the murder of President Lincoln? No. Do we have a ways to go? Yes. But human beings are never perfect. Societies are never perfect. We have to continually work toward what is better. And as time goes by, people change, cultures change, sensitivities change, and we have to be sensitive to that too. But in order to get it right, maybe it had to take us to war. And Americans were willing to sacrifice their lives for this country, and their lives to do what is right. And many of you have heard of, or perhaps read, the Gettysburg Address. When I was in school, we had to memorize it. Why don't they memorize it today? Maybe it'll open some eyes to see what was sacrificed in the cause of justice. Let me close by reading the Gettysburg Address. 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on the great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in the larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living in daily struggle here have consecrated far above our poor power to add or detract. The world, the little goat, will long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored day we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. God love you.